Okay. It's 5:30. We will call the City Council meeting to order for today, Monday, May 3rd, 2021. I would ask that everyone in the audience go ahead and put your electronic devices on silent or on vibrate, and we'll keep the distractions hopefully down to a minimum. Roll call, please.
Evans.
Here.
Janser.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Pittner. I think he's there. Somewhere. Badragula.
Here.
Russ.
Here.
Sitma.
Here. I'll check one last time. Alderman Pittner, are you online or joining us via Zoom? As soon as we get him keyed in, we'll make note of that. Number 2 on our agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Number 3 on our agenda is the mayor's report. I do have a number of items just to go through here very quickly here for the month of April. The first most notably on the 7th of April, I did have the opportunity to go visit with the 91st Missile Wing and attend one of the ICBM missile site launch door activation tests. This is the first test on this specific missile silo since it was installed, and essentially, just for a brief breakdown, they do remove the missile out of the silo prior to the activation, but go through the actual procedure in this test mechanism as an actual launch and put a significant amount of dirt to catch the many ton concrete door and blow it as though it was an operational launch. So first one that I had the opportunity to see, everything went flawlessly, and there were a great many spectators out on the site to witness the event. So it was very, very appreciative to be there. Later in the afternoon, then, I did have the opportunity to tour one of the missile alert facilities just south of Minot along Highway 83 and actually go down into the launch facility and see the work that the great men and women at Minot Air Force Base do each and every day, and the defenders that were out there deployed as well for their 7 days on and 7 days off. On the 8th, the Economic Development Stakeholders Meeting was here at City Hall. On the 12th, then, Alderman Padragula was actually at this one along with me. Minot police officers from our police force deployed with the North Dakota National Guard. We were there for their send-off as they were headed off for, I guess, an undisclosed location for an undetermined amount of time, at least from our understanding. On the 12th was the Task Force 21 Committee meeting, special council meeting, and then the 13th was Minot Flood Project, Home Acquisition, and the Minot Board of Equalization meeting, which we were all at. On the 14th, Minot Chamber EDC monthly board meeting. On the 14th, then the ACHA tournament, hockey tournament kicked off in Minot the following morning, but on the 14th, I was there for a meet and greet with all of the coaches that had arrived for the tournament. Ward County Weed Board on the 16th, the Knights of the Columbus State Convention at the Clarion Hotel did welcome in many hundreds of Knights of Columbus from around the state. Our regular council meeting on the 19th, special meeting then with Lieutenant Mazazera, and I'm hoping I'm getting that name correctly. I put this one on here rather than just under one of my generic meetings, as he was one of the missileers that I had met when I had visited the MAF earlier, and has had a great interest in city operations and is looking at his continued education and was looking for an opportunity to meet with the city manager and myself, and possibly looking at an internship down the road. So some great connections there, and great young airman looking at continuing his career after Minot Air Force Base. On the 22nd, we did meet with some BNSF staff members talking about what an issue that will be coming up before this body likely at our next meeting. And then on the 26th, had the opportunity to participate in the Broadway listening session for the focus group. The recap meeting for COVID-19 on the 27th, 29th was Task Force 21 meet and greet at Minot Air Force Base. Some of you may have seen some of this on a local news station. This was U.S. senators from North Dakota. That would be Senator Hoeven. Also from Maine, New Hampshire, Nebraska, and Iowa, and then Air Force officials, including the United States Chief of Staff, the commander of the Air Force Global Strike Command, for several hours of helping talk about the great things that happen at Minot Air Force Base, the connection to the community, and the importance that each other have within not only our city, but also within their mission standing. So great opportunity to really talk about all those great things. On the 30th then, KX News interview regarding legislative wrap-up, and I went far here. Outside of that, 24 other regular meetings regarding city business, and then phone calls, emails, social media, and staff interactions. Any questions regarding my monthly report? If not, we'll move on to our next item under the mayor's report, and that is a proclamation here. Proclamation, the City of Minot proclaims May Building Safety Month, whereas our city is committed to recognizing that our growth and strength depends on the safety and economic value of homes, buildings, and infrastructure that serve our citizens, both in everyday life and in times of disaster. And whereas our confidence in the resilience of these buildings that make up our community is achieved through the devotion of vigilant guardians, building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, tradespeople, design professionals, laborers, plumbers, and others in the construction industry who work year-round to ensure the safe construction buildings. And whereas these guardians are dedicated to members of the International Code Council, a nonprofit that brings together local, state, and federal officials that are experts in the building environment to create and implement the highest quality codes to protect us in the buildings where we live, learn, work, play. And whereas our nation benefits economically and technologically from the use of international codes that are developed by a national voluntary consensus codes and standards developing organization, our government is able to avoid a high cost of complexity of developing and maintaining these codes, which are most widely adopted building safety and fire prevention codes in the world. Whereas these modern building codes include safeguards to protect the public from hazards such as hurricanes, snowstorms, tornadoes, wildfires, floods, and earthquake. And whereas Building Safety Month is sponsored by the International Code Council to remind the public about the critical role of our community's largely unknown protectors of public safety, our local code officials who assure us of safe, sustainable, energy-efficient, and livable buildings that are essential to American prosperity. And whereas prevent, prepare, protect, building codes save. The theme for the Building Safety Month 2021 encourages all Americans to raise awareness about the importance of safety and resilient construction, fire prevention, disaster mitigation, energy conservation, water safety, training the next generation, and new technologies in the construction industry. Whereas each year, in observance of the Building Safety Month, people all over the world are asked to consider the commitment to improve building safety, resilience, and economic investment at home and in the community, and to acknowledge the essential service provided to all of us by the local, state, and building departments, fire prevention bureaus, and the federal agencies in protecting lives and property. Now, therefore, I, Sean Sitma, Mayor of Minot, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2021 as Building Safety Month. Accordingly, I encourage our citizens to join with their communities in participation in the Building Safety Month activities. Luke Tillema, one of our inspectors, is in the audience, and I'll have this proclamation for you after the meeting. With that, that is the end of the city for the mayor's report. I'm then turning to number 4, city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council members, just a couple of things to highlight outside of the memo that's already prepared and in the packet for you and the public. I did want to state that after some discussion last week with city staff and with Governor Burgum's lifting of the COVID emergency order, staff is recommending ceasing the Binex COVID testing at Fire Station 1. We would like this Thursday, May 6th, to be the last day that we provide that. I am still waiting for some information from Senator Hoeven's office with regards to with the lifting of that statewide emergency order, how that impacts funding. In particular, the FEMA funds that we were using to reimburse some of the costs of conducting the Binex testing. We're still waiting for a final answer on that. But I wanted to present that, and if there's any concerns or discussion from council, we would need to know that as soon as possible so we can make arrangements for staffing and those types of things if that isn't the will of the council. And then lastly, I do want to do a reminder that this month will be very busy with budget. We'll be doing council tours of the different departments several days throughout this month. And then we'll also have a special work session on May 24th regarding economic development, specifically with a presentation and some conversation with staff with regards to efforts on that as well. And then also a reminder that June 11th and 12th is when we'll do the council workshop with the facilitators here, working through some prioritization efforts and government building exercises as part of that facilitation. So with that, unless there's any other questions with regards to what's outlined in the memo, I don't have anything further to report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Are there any questions at this time for Harold? Mr. City Manager, are you looking for any direct motion for the ceasing of that operation for the testing at Fire Station number 1, or just nominal direction?
Staff is prepared to cease that, so unless the council has a difference of opinion on that and would like us to continue doing that, I don't believe any action is necessary.
Okay. Is there any other concerns or questions then? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to our next item, and that is item number 5, the City Attorney. City Attorney's report.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, I submitted a written report. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for our City Attorney? Seeing none, thank you, Kelly. And for the folks that are watching at home or online, that report is also available and downloadable off the city's website where this agenda is located. Moving on to our consent items, we do have a number of items within consent, that is 6.1 through 6.19. We are going to pull 6.3, number 5, for individual consideration. Are there any other items that need to be pulled for individual discussion or consideration? Otherwise, they will be passed as recommended on the consent agenda. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I would move approval on the remaining items.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson for approval on the remaining of the items, all items but 6.3, number 5. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Ross. Any discussion on the motion? Second call for discussion. Final call. Being none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pajagula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 6.3, number 5, is the ordinance number 5599, amending the CMCO modifying process regarding the permit and licensing. For those folks that haven't downloaded the entire PDF, it is quite lengthy. The specific area that was requested to pull was regarding the licensing for the unmanned gambling machines. At this time, the significant change on here is essentially changing from the unlimited on the unmanned sites to a number that is cited as 6. Given the number of people here and also considering this is the item that most people came to discuss, perhaps it would be worthwhile having this discussion and then looking for a motion after that discussion. So first, I would look for those that might be in favor of the motion, or rather than the recommendation that is before the council tonight, to come forward and state your name, your city of residence, and perhaps affiliation as well.
Josh Ressler, 2017 35th Avenue Southeast. Members of the council, thank you. Mr. Mayor, thank you. I am the gaming manager for the Magic City Lions. We currently have 3 sites here in Minot, and looking to renew those sites. In looking at this ordinance, and there's a number of things that I think we've looked at that need to get changed. This ordinance was in effect before the ETABs came about, and I believe the way it read was you could have 5 manned sites and unlimited unmanned sites. Is that correct? Okay. And with that also, though, it said on the unmanned sites you could have 3 games of chance, and I'm not sure exactly what those 3 games of chance were, if it was 3 separate pull tab games, or if it was, as I'm assuming if it was unmanned, it would have to be 3 pull tab games. So the question then becomes with the ETAB machines, is each one of those machines considered 1 game of chance? Or if you have 6 games on the ETABs, are those 6 games of chance? If that's the case, then obviously we're out of line on that ordinance. So we do need to look at this ordinance and get it changed so that it's correct. But I'm in favor of going to 6 sites only for gaming, whether that's manned sites or unmanned sites, 6 sites total. I've talked to some of the other gaming managers in town, some of the bigger gaming organizations in town. I think they're in favor of that also. I think that these ETABs have changed gaming big time in Minot and in the state, so that charities or not-for-profits have the opportunity to get into gaming and can do very well for their organization. I don't think it's right if we allow unlimited number of sites in town. I think it would limit those smaller nonprofits that are looking at getting into gaming. I think it would discourage them from getting into gaming, period. And I've talked to a few different nonprofits that are looking at getting into gaming here in the next year. And I think if we have a finite number of sites in town, if those sites are all taken up by the gaming organizations that are here now, it would push them out and they wouldn't even approach that at all. So I'd like to see us limit that number to 6. I think it's a good number. And yep, I think that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ressler? Thank you. Anyone else in favor of the recommendation that is before us? If not, those that are in opposition of the recommendation? Those that are neutral?
Did you want to show hands?
Your name for the record and affiliation.
John Reese. I live in Minot, 2724 Heritage Drive. I work for Minot Junior Golf, MSU Beaver Boosters, and MSU Alumni Association. Currently, Minot Junior Golf has 5 manned sites, and I do have 1 unmanned site. So I would be maxed out at my limit of 6 on MSU. If I understand your guys' wording on the 6 max.
I would look to our city clerk and the understanding. I think that we're looking at 6 unmanned sites, and the manned sites limit stays the same.
Mayor, Sitma, members of council, the way that the ordinance is drafted would limit it to a total of 6 sites.
Total of 6 sites. Okay.
Okay, if it's a total of 6, then as Minot Junior Golf, we would be limited for any expansion or growth. We would just be limited to the 6 that we currently have, and we wouldn't be able to add on any. Do I believe that a number should be set on how many we can have? Absolutely. I don't know what that number is. I would maybe lean towards possibly 8 total, manned or unmanned, as a total of 8. On MSU, I currently run 5 sites, 4 in town, 1 outside of town. And on MSU Alumni, I have 1 manned and 1 unmanned. So if somebody came to me and asked, can I work with you as a partnership? On junior golf, I'd have to say no. On MSU, I'd be cutting it pretty tight, and on MSU Alumni, I'd be able to do it. Unfortunately, MSU Alumni is a smaller company, and funding for us and new projects would be limited, so The other two organizations I have would be more willing and able to accommodate a project like that. So I would say if we could look at a collective number that's a little bigger than 6, but not exceeding 10, I would be in favor for that.
Any questions at this time? Alderman Ross.
Yes, is it under, just for instance, like the Minot Junior Golf Program, who you're representing here too, are they constantly looking, or are these organizations constantly looking at growth, or are they satisfied with where they stand right now?
We do have a few possible projects in the future, and I'm unsure of if they're going to be manned sites or just like a pull-tab machine or electronics.
So you have, for instance, other bars, restaurants in town that have approached Minot Junior Golf asking for
Yes.
a partnership?
Yes.
And that still continues?
Yes.
Okay.
So I would just prefer not to be able to tell people no, or you'll have to wait until something opens up, or discontinue a long-standing partnership I already have.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Anyone else that wishes to come up and speak at this time?
Robert Teets, 6503 54th Avenue, Southeast, Minot, representing Minot Hockey, gaming manager for Minot Hockey Boosters. I'm kind of on board with the 6. I think the problem, if you're looking all the way up to 10, right now, what the problem is with these E-tabs, there's basically no expense. I could find a dormant gaming license, you know, that's been sitting out there. Say, for example, the Eagles hasn't been in Minot forever. They're just going out of gaming now. There's absolutely no cost to E-tabs. You get them free from the manufacturers. All you need is a starting bank, and that's covered within the first week of play. Basically, you could have organizations running around starting out, you know, that way 3 organizations could just start out immediately and take 30 Minot sites if it was 10. Like I said, there's just no cost. We've done the work through the years. We went through blackjack and, you know, fought with bar owners and $10,000 bingos and, you know, for very little profit. Now that the E-tabs and we're finally making money, everybody's jumping in on us. And it's just too easy, you know, I mean, and not even Minot sites. I mean, you're talking, you know, out-of-town sites. There's out of New Salem, they've got sites all over the state. All he does is got it rode around, try to steal sites, and, you know, you're looking at that. We can operate on 60% or 40%. That gives him 60% to basically put in their pockets, a lot of these people. I'm not saying they're doing it. I just think there's a lot of nefarious organizations out there that want to take advantage of this. So I guess that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Teets. Any questions? Alderman Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When you talk about stealing a license or however the process is, can anybody who owns a license just show up and start placing machines, or is it like the gentleman previous said, you have to have a partnership? You have to actually be invited into that establishment to set up gaming?
Well, as an organization, we can go out and solicit bars. I could go to John's Bars and try to give them a better offer, and, you know, but in Minot, we have a gentleman's agreement. We just haven't done that. We just have all got together and we don't poach other people's sites. But with the E-tabs and the easy money and the low startup costs, it's just rampant right now. It's ridiculous. I know organizations that have been in DK's in Williston. It's been the Williston State College for 30 years. All of a sudden they got new management and they wanted to go with the Legion. And, you know, they signed a rental, but the city had already approved a site authorization for the college. Basically, the mayor said, no, we're not going to have this infighting. You're either going to go with the college that you've had for 30 years or you're not going to have gaming. The Legion guy stood up. He said, no, there's no discussion. Sit down. So, I mean, it's a problem right now. It's something that kind of needs, I think the state needs to address it, you know, with some new rules. You know, I don't know if there's stuff you guys can look at, but
How many sites are you currently involved in?
we have 5.
Okay.
5 Minot sites.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Teets. Any other questions? Thank you. Anyone else that wishes to come forward, either in favor, in opposition, or neutral? All right. Look to the city council. We do have a recommendation that is before us within the packet that does have the limitation at 6. What is the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor?
Alderman Ross.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we limit the manned and unmanned to a total of 8 locations in the city of Minot.
Motion with the changes, with the one change to a number of 8. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alderman Patagula. Discussion on the motion. Alderwoman Olson.
Mr. Mayor, my question would be, where did the number 6 come from? Who is recommending 6 to us as opposed to 8?
I can probably answer that, Alderwoman Olson. When we were having some early discussions here about a week ago, the issue came up that there were a significant amount of applications coming in, and given that one provider already does have 6 locations, if we're talking about limiting, we figured rather than throwing the cap higher than that, and to put into perspective, Grand Forks does have a cap of 10, but it is limited only to those establishments that have full liquor licenses. And then looking around the state to some of the other communities that have ordinances that vary, I don't want to say off random numbers, but it kind of seemed like random numbers. And then some discussions throughout the week as well with some of the different nonprofits out there through telephone or other means. 6 was up for discussion, and it seemed like a reasonable place to start.
Thank you.
Alderman Ross.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. The reason I suggested 8 was I think it's in this community, whether it's the larger charitable gaming operations such as the Hockey Boosters and the Junior Golf Association, they're reputable. They run good operations. And for that reason, I think that's why they're probably the largest operators in town. And I would think as if you're an owner of a bar or restaurant, you're looking for a reputable operation to come in to help set up some charitable gaming. I think that's, so I don't want to penalize them at this time, saying, look, if we pass this, then you're restricted from growing. And I think if a local business wants to have Minot Junior Golf or the Hockey Boosters or any other organization, they have that opportunity to go in and talk to them. That's why I felt the increase. I don't want to penalize them, first of all, for showing up and supporting their sides, but I don't want to penalize them in case they have other opportunities out there. But I do want to limit it. So that's sort of why I made the motion.
Further discussion? Just from a little more insight for my discussion as well to Alderwoman Olson and maybe even Mr. Teets. I came into this without knowing really pretty much anything about the charitable gambling's ordinances and or state century code until the phone calls started coming in. Looking into it a little bit, I was actually quite surprised at the 60% that can be taken in overhead for expenses. With my understanding of charitable gaming, I thought it would have been much, much more going to the charities rather than the overhead. And as I began to, see where it evolved from when the man sites were obviously in place first, there was overhead for expenses, paying people and having the accounting and so forth. But so it has been exceptionally educational to me. I'm not quite sure I'm thrilled about how the State Century Code reads on that 60%, given the fact that it's been seen in Williston and other communities with a lot of movement of trying to get into the business. Now, granted, altruistic reasons and helping charities raise money, I can't argue with that. But it is still shocking to me that 60% can be taken for overhead for expenses. Can be, not necessarily is. In the face of charitable gaming when the overhead is and can be that low. So I'll support the number 8, and as I've explained to other folks, whatever that number settles on, ordinances are living, breathing documents, and if change is needed down the road, as the industry or as the will of the people changes too, it can be amended at that time. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to limit the sites, total of 8. There is a second. Thank you
Mr.
from legal.
Mayor, just for clarification, the motion is to approve all of the ordinance changes with the modification to the number.
Yes,
It's a number of other unrelated changes as well.
yes, thank you for that clarification. With that, please call the roll.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to the end of our consent agenda. Into the action item 7.1 is a public hearing, the building relocation request to 811 3rd Street Northeast, John Thompson. Public hearing to consider the request from John Thompson to relocate an accessory building from 2263 62nd Avenue Northwest, Ryder, North Dakota 58779 to 811 3rd Street Northeast, Minot 58701, also known as Lakeview Edition, Lot 2, Block 16, subject to conditions. Staff recommends approval of the request. This is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor or in opposition to the recommendation that is before council. Your name and city of residence for the record, please.
John Thompson, 811 3rd Street Northeast.
Hi, John.
How you doing? Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as
Been a
well.
while. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. I just got letters saying
If
to
you have
show
any
up, so.
comments or information that you want to
okay.
present to the council, this is your opportunity.
I just want to have a garage at my place, and I'd like to have a shop to work on stuff, and it's really expensive to build something new, and my friend had a garage available for me to move in, and then once this year I get to get that fixed up and painted and looking nice again, and just want to put my pickup at in my shop. So.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Thompson? Thanks, sir. Appreciate you being here. This is, and again, a public hearing. Anyone to come forward and speak in favor or in opposition? Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor?
Alderman Janser.
Mr. Mayor, I move we close the public hearing and approve the item.
Motion to close the public hearing and approve the item from Alderman Janser. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Ross. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 7.2 is approve eminent domain for identified flood buyout properties. The city has striven to reach the amicable agreement with the property owners on purchase prices for the identified properties. The city has allowed far more time and extended far more in written communication with the property owners than required by the Federal Uniform Relocation Act. Therefore, the point has been reached to assure that the acquisition process does not affect the timeline for flood control projects. Authorization of eminent domain is necessary. City Council approved attachment resolution authorizing the recommendation is the City Council approved the attached resolution authorizing special counsel for eminent domain to commence proceedings for the acquisition of properties needed for flood control projects at 1209 6th Avenue Southwest, owned by John and Susan Dockin, partial parking lot. Take at 400 9th Street Southwest, owned by Loyal Order of the Moose Lodge, number 822 and 2816 14th Avenue Southwest, and 1318 28th Street Southwest, owned by Robert and Anilles Roberts. Documents are attached. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Olson to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion? For the sake of information, I just do want to state, given last week's on the public comments, this is a process that certainly is not taken lightly. One individual did reach out to me and had grave concerns about going through the eminent domain process and the aspects of how they are undertaken. For the public's information, these are all processes that are followed to the letter of the federal law for the dollars that are being used, the state law and state century code and city ordinances. Staff does make every effort to get to an amicable decision on these, and it's certainly not taken lightly. I do support the process simply because I do know to the extent of which staff and others go to try to find a reasonable solution prior to this. Any other discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Quadrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 7.3 is the CTE Magic Fund Agreement. The MSU Foundation requested a Magic Fund grant in the amount of $800,000 for the purchase of a property at 120 Burdick Expressway East to be used for the operations of a career and technical education CTE center. The agreement provides for the grant and contemplates the MSU Foundation's leasing of the property to Dakota College, so Dakota College can improve the structure and operate a CTE at the site for 10 years after issuance of a certification of occupancy. Motion is to, or rather, the recommendation is to approve the Magic Fund agreement between the City of Minot and the MSU Foundation relating to the CTE project. Alderwoman Olson.
Mr. Mayor, I've been waiting a long time to move approval on this item.
Thank you, Alderwoman Olson. Motion is to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Janser. Discussion on the item. Alderwoman Olson.
Just so happy that we're to this point, and the process has been a little laborious. But if you read through the documents, you'll see that there is a lot of information. And I'm happy with the attorneys that have worked on it and brought it to us for approval.
Any further discussion? Alderman Janser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to indicate strong support for this CTE. Believe me, I know from my day job that we need technical education in this community. We need to improve on our workforce in that area, and so I'm delighted to see this moving forward. Thank you.
Any further discussion? I do want to also state to Alderwoman Olson, to all of the rest of the folks that participated in this MSU's president, Dakota College at Botano's president, Tim Mahalik, Minot Public Schools, and for the attorneys that went through this laborious process. It took a long while, but you guys did a great job of bringing it to the finish line with the help of following Mr. Zakian and the guidelines that are outlined on this one. This is going to be a tremendous asset to the community, and I hope a starting point where we see an expansion on this, as we saw some of that efforted at the state legislature through the career and technical education focus that we saw through a couple of different bills as it evolved. So great work on this, very supportive.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Quadrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 7.4 is the City Hall Program Final Recommendations, item 4466. JLG and staff have taken the feedback received from the council on April 19th and developed program space diagrams with the building committee's input. The primary program decision remaining after the council's input was whether to leave the engineering and community development at the Public Works. The recommendation to council was to approve the program space option 2, which includes keeping the engineering and community development departments at the Public Works building where they're currently at. Mr. Meyer. our
Thank
city
you,
engineer.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Members of council. We have Mr. Doug Larson with JLG here tonight, and we'll give you just a brief overview of the couple options that we have, and we're here for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer.
Derek, if you could pull up that PDF, please. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Larson, welcome back.
Thank you.
Mayor Sitma, members of the council, my name is Doug Larson. I'm with JLG Architects here in Minot. And I'm here just to review the two options that we were directed to look into further by the council last time we appeared. Option number one would be to make this new City Hall location more of a one-stop shop, which would incorporate both administrative and infrastructure functions that are currently located out at the Public Works Building into the new City Hall project. As you can see, building option number one was not recommended by the building committee for a number of reasons that we'll cover when we look at option two here, which was to really relocate the administrative functions of City Hall to the new City Hall location. This was the recommendation or the option preferred by the building committee. And it was for a number of reasons that are listed at the bottom of the page here. One of which, if we move everything to City Hall, like was recommended in option number one, the building is basically maxed out. There's not room for future growth and such. Although there is a small amount of growth built into each program area, it would really limit the city's options in the future for expanding different departments. Option number two, I guess, minimizes the amount of construction work that's going to be on the first floor, which obviously allows for the city to consider keeping some tenants that are currently in there, some that are short-term and another that's long-term. So it leaves that floor for future growth, maintains a strong daily interaction for engineering and public works out at the Public Works Building, which is a different type of clientele, more construction and working folks that greater possibility of, I guess, tracking mud and different things related to that type of work into this public works portion of this building. And it separates infrastructure from the city. It was felt that the infrastructure folks work better together out of public works. The city's had a significant investment out there recently. And as things become more digitized, there's more opportunity for growth in those departments out at Public Works than there would be at the proposed new site. So for those reasons, the committee is recommending going with option two. And I guess I'm here to answer any questions that you may have on either plan.
Appreciate the explanation and the overview there, Mr. Larson. Any questions at this time? Thank you, Mr. Larson.
Thank you.
With that, I would look for the wishes of the council on this. Alderwoman Olson.
Mr. Mayor, I would recommend option two, make the motion to recommend option two.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve option two. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Ross. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Alderwoman Olson.
Mr. Mayor, as I sit on the building committee, there has been a lot of discussion related to both options, and I know that, we had been tasked with looking at having a one-stop shop, but as was stated, it really does take up a lot of space both internally, and I think they had done a rough estimate on just externally the amount of vehicles that they would bring from engineering to downtown, and it just made more sense at this point to leave engineering and community development out at Public Works. It seemed like it was the most practical decision, and I'm just hopeful that everyone is in agreement with that.
Any further discussion?
Mayor.
Yes, Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to state that I'm getting feedback here. So I'm just appreciative of staff taking a look at both options. I just didn't want us at our last meeting to be dismissive of any alternative. And I'm glad we turned over every stone and made sure we're making the right decision, which I think we are after discussions with staff. So thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Final call. Motion is to approve option two. Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Quadrigula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to our next item, 7.5. This is the 2021 to 2025 Capital Improvement Plan, item 4572. Every year, the city departments submit projects for inclusion into the 5-year Capital Improvement Plan, also known as the CIP. The plan becomes the guiding document for the city staff to program and build capital construction projects throughout the city. Staff has included dozens of projects for the council's consideration for program year 21 through 2025. Recommendation to council is to adopt the 2021 to 2025 capital improvement plan. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor?
Alderman Ross.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve the capital improvement plan. But in addition to, I would like to pull the Ann Street Bridge out and not use any capital improvement funds for reconstruction of that at this time.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Ross and a second by Alderwoman Olson to adopt the CIP plan pulling the Ann Street Bridge. For those folks that are either in the audience or at home, if you're looking at the attachment, that's on page 66, project line 13 marked. Motion and a second. Mr. Meyer.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Back again. I am here. I can give you a brief PowerPoint presentation if you wish. It's just an overview of the plan, give some highlights, but it's completely up to you and the council if you want me to go through with that or not.
Well, I'd hate to waste any effort and time that you've put into something that won't be seen, so please go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to take a minute here just to walk through the process, and this is primarily for the public's benefit. You've been through this a couple times now, but essentially what happens is department heads get together and we evaluate capital projects that we feel that are needed throughout the city. So if you follow this flow chart, essentially what we do is we go through this planning process. We fill out a worksheet that provides information about the project. We try to come up with costs, look at locations, grant opportunities, those sort of things, and we assemble those, which is in the appendix in the capital improvement plan, so you can see what that all looks like. Then we work with the finance department to make sure that funds are available for projects. So they'll sit down with us and we map out potential funding sources that we can include in a draft capital improvement plan. After we determine if a project can be funded, we include it in the draft project. We send that to City Council, which we did about a month ago for review. And then we come to tonight where we make some decisions on projects to include or not include or move forward. So that's where we're at in the process. Overall, this next 5 years, which is including 2021 here, we're looking at just over $337 million in projects. Primarily that resides in public works because that's where we place the flood control projects. So you'll notice the theme here within our capital improvement plan the last several years is the flood control projects and the phasing and the timelines of those really drives our plan. As we've mentioned before, the city of Minot makes great use of state and federal dollars. You can see here over half of our program is funded by those means. The next large segment that we have is revenue bonds that we need to help fund our share of the flood control projects. So you can see the breakdown there again, about $120 million in state funds and just over $54 million in federal funds. We make our best effort to try to, what we call level load the capital improvement plan, so to try to be consistent on the level of funding that we include in capital projects. That's really difficult with our flood control projects just because of the timing of the different phases when they're ready to bid, the timing of the funds that come in from state funding sources. So if you would take out the majority of the projects listed in the Public Works Department, which again primarily revolve around the flood control, we are fairly level loaded. We're about in that $10 to $20 million a year range. So I think we're doing pretty good if you take out some of those larger flood control projects. That's all I had. I just wanted to give a brief rundown, and then we are available, myself and other department heads are available for questions on any of the projects.
Thank you, Lance. Just one quick follow-up here. With the motion that is to pull the Ann Street Bridge funding project from this funding cycle at 1.927, what then becomes of, let's say, the program dollars for that time period? Does it get cycled into the street projects below it, or how does that work?
Mr. Mayor, right now, the way that we recommended funding that project was through tax levy. So in this case, if we did move forward with that project, then the city council wouldn't have to levy those tax dollars. So they could either be rededicated to something else, or they're just not levied, period.
And for clarification, property tax levy dollars, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Any questions for our city engineer at this time? Thank you, Lance. If we have any, we'll bring you back up. Seeing as this has had substantial input in the past, I would also open this up for anyone in the audience that did want to come forward, given the motion that is made on the Ann Street Bridge. Name, city, and affiliation for the record, please.
Mayor Sitma, thank you. Josh Walski, 1340 Main Street South. Standing here today on behalf of the Downtown Business and Professional Association. And I did include a draft of this testimony. Should be in front of you guys, but I'm going to be a little ad hoc here as well, so we move along. So Mayor Sitma, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to stand and testify on behalf of Minot's Downtown Business and Professional Association. As of February of this year, I have been aboard as the interim director. It's the first time in approximately 5 years that the DBPA has had a full-time staff member. And so I also want to call attention to a letter that is in your packet that was included to you tonight that was drafted last September, actually, and at a point in time when the DBPA was volunteer run, there was a miscommunication and the letter simply wasn't sent. So I want to call attention to that because everybody knows that I have been a passionate supporter of this bridge for a very long time. And I don't want the DBPA's support for this project, which has existed formally since last September, to be confused with my own support. So I just wanted to make that clarifying point at the beginning. With those details out of the way, I did want to point out a number of reasons why we, the DBPA, believe this bridge should remain a part of the capital improvement plan. And to begin with, I'm going to start by talking about plans. The city's comprehensive plan, the riverfront and center plan, the IEDC report. We've done a number of planning exercises throughout this community over the last many years, and they all speak to issues like connectivity, transportation alternatives that encourage walking and biking, and people-centric locations that create spaces for people as opposed to prioritizing automobiles. They speak to making the river a central point of our community. And in all of these areas, the Ann Street Bridge is an asset. It is a connection point for pedestrians. It is a connection across the river. It is a connection point across the often impenetrable barrier that is the railroad. And it's been with us for an extraordinary amount of time providing that service. I want to call attention to students and schools. Please consider that residents of downtown and their elementary age kids typically will attend McKinley School. The Ann Street Bridge is a direct path to that school from downtown. It's simply about an 800-foot walk across the bridge, and they are a block away from their school at that point. Going the other direction, we have high school age students, grade 9 and 10, coming into downtown from the north side of Minot. When the bridge was in service, it was not irregular to see dozens of kids on that bridge on a daily basis, commuting back and forth to school. And as we move towards a future where Central Campus has the possibility of at least becoming a middle school, I think it's likely that this bridge's future as a vital pedestrian route will only grow. Fewer middle school kids are able to drive, and therefore we are likely to see them walking and riding to school more often. I also want to talk to convenience and experience. We've heard comments that the Ann Street Bridge isn't needed because we have new infrastructure at the Broadway Bridge. And at some point in the future, an intent to maybe invest in a 3rd Street viaduct. That's an exceptionally expensive project at roughly $20 to $30 million. So I'm not sure that we should be counting that at this particular point as a potential future project. So in this interim period, this Ann Street Bridge is an exceptionally convenient pedestrian route. From the foot of the bridge on the north side into the heart of downtown is approximately 800 feet. To remove that vital corridor, you then have to go over to Broadway and over and south, or over to 3rd Street and south. The walk becomes approximately 2,100 feet, and that just puts you on the corner of downtown. Now, I assure you, if you drive by and look at this, it does not look inconvenient. But if you walk it, that extra 1,300 feet is very significant. And for pedestrians, like drivers, we care about the amount of time we have to expend getting from where we're going to where we want to get to. So please do consider that. And as a request, maybe before you finalize this vote, I would ask that you go make that walk and have the experience of going down Broadway and the aesthetic of cars traveling past at remarkable rates. It is much safer since it has been redeveloped in the last few years, but there is a qualitative difference in a walk experience when you are traveling in your own pedestrian network versus when you are traveling next to vehicle infrastructure. So I would ask you to consider that. I would ask you to consider the opportunity and loss of what we lose if we let go of this vital easement we have with the railroad and have had for the last approximately 13 years. If at some point in the future the area to the north of the tracks became an area that we wanted to make an investment in, or perhaps the railroad vacated and that became available for a recreational area, will the railroad ever give us this easement back? And I suspect we all know the answer to that, and it is very likely no. So when we let go of this bridge, we will in all likelihood be letting go of our opportunity to cross the tracks in that location forever. I also want to talk about place and potential. We are at the end of prom season. I don't know if you have noticed, like I have on Facebook and other social media sites, that there are a lot of prom pictures being taken in the downtown corridor this year, and in years past. And it's because there is a certain authentic and aesthetic quality to downtown that people gravitate towards. I'd ask you to consider, can you imagine a prom picture being taken on the 3rd Street Viaduct, or even on the new, improved and very beautiful Broadway Bridge? And it's kind of an absurd idea, because we all know and understand that while those are nice facilities and they are important, vital infrastructure, they just do not deliver on that sense of place that an authentic 113-year-old wooden structure delivers. And so I'd ask you to consider that this is a meaningful part of many generations of Minot's past, and it can be again in the future with an investment. It's very easy for me to imagine a historical walk across this bridge that highlights the boneyards of Minot's very early days, or the roundhouse of the railroad's glory days. We also have a new property that the city has acquired for flood protection on the north side of the river, which might make an extraordinary location for a flood commemoration park or observation area. The storyboards along the way could also tell our stories of flood recovery and resilience. So before you decide on the fate of the bridge, I would ask you to simply imagine with me the potential that we have in this location, and ask whether it's not whether we should invest in it, but what more we should invest it to turn it into a truly remarkable structure for this community. So I'm drawing to an end here. I do want to also point out the fact that this feels, from a downtown perspective, to be a very inopportune time to remove a vital piece of infrastructure from our formally adopted plan. We have a national conversation taking place about infrastructure. We have funding sources potentially coming forth from that new legislation. We have funding sources attached to pandemic recovery dollars, in which there are many questions still remaining about how that may or may not be available to be used. And so at this point in time, to remove the bridge, when these opportunities are, maybe they exist, maybe they don't, but right now they are certainly unknown. It might be a shame to not have this project in the plan, given that circumstance. So that is the conclusion of my comments. Mayor Sitma, members of council, I appreciate this opportunity to speak tonight. I will certainly stand for any questions, but obviously the Downtown Association is very passionate about this, as am I, and we would like to see it invested in for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolski. Any questions at this time? Thank you. Anyone else that wishes to comment on the motion? Okay. Seeing none, I would bring it back to council for comments here. The motion is again to approve the CIP, removing the Ann Street Bridge. Alderwoman Evans.
I would like to ask Alderman Ross if he'll separate that motion so that there can be a motion to vote on removing the Ann Street Bridge and then a motion to vote on the outcome of that for the capital improvement plan. See what I mean? So that people, you know what I mean, who may want, you know, like I don't want to have to vote to say no to the capital improvement plan, but you've tied it in with Ann Street Bridge. See what I mean?
I think I do follow a little bit on that. I would look to Alderman Ross if you're following and if you wish to change your motion or keep it as it is.
I guess I want to, Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Evans, I just want to make it clear. My motion to, I'm removing it from the capital improvement plan. And my reason for doing that, I mean, we get this every year. I'm not saying I'm against the bridge. I'm not saying in no way am I saying tear it down. I'm just saying you look back on the city manager's report and the report from the finance director, we're still in such a state of not knowing what has happened pandemically to our budget and to our future resources. With this capital improvement plan, I think there are other projects that need our focus more than a bridge that has been out of service for how many years? I'm not even sure. Mr. Mayor, you may know that answer. But I'm not saying we're removing this and giving this back to the railroad. By no means. I'm saying let's push it to the back burner, focus on the capital improvement projects that are important for infrastructure and safety for our residents. And possibly this would give the Downtown Association or any other needed or invested stakeholders in this maybe an opportunity to find some potential historical grant funding to help on this. This is a big project. It's a costly project. And, you know, we've got a historic bridge that connects downtown to Eastwood Park. That's a beautiful bridge. That's a pedestrian bridge that would look beautiful for prom pictures. You know, I mean, we've just got to look. And this has been out of circulation for long enough to where I just think let's move it back. Let's move it off the project. Let's approve the capital improvement plan. And then if needed, we can revisit it next year or in 2 years or 3 years. That's where I stand on it.
Alderwoman Evans, I believe it's still just one motion, removing and approving rather than separation.
Okay.
Any further comments on the motion? Alderman Patagula.
Thank you. Some of these probably would be more of a focus of our council planning and retreat meeting, but I want to make sure that they get brought up. First of all, I really appreciate all the effort and time that has gone into this plan, and I think generally it's a very sound one. But there are 4 points I wanted to make. The first point is that it seems to me very much staff-driven. Now, I don't know that that's a bad thing, but I think we need to highlight more the opportunities for input by citizens and the council. I think this thing has a life of its own. There are things built in for 3-5 years, conceptually probably longer. And we're talking about a great deal of money, and it reflects our priorities even more so than a yearly budget. And I'd like to see, again, the opportunities for council and citizen input highlighted and emphasized a bit more. The second point I'd like to make is that I would like to clarify the mechanism for council input. There's a little arrow on there, there's a box, and that's it. When we look at input for various departments, there are very elaborate forms and scoring systems. And I'd like us to look at that as part of our overall communication discussion that we're going to have hopefully at our retreat. The third point I'd like to make, and this is more from my scientific background, is that it's very data-driven and very numbers-oriented. Every department submits requests. They're scored by this very elaborate system. Weights are assigned to all sorts of things. And I sometimes wonder if there isn't the appearance of too much precision, or there is perhaps too much precision than is warranted. For example, if I remember correctly, and I didn't bring my notes with me this evening, the proposal to add auxiliary power to our traffic lights gets something like 85 points, and in the ranking system from 0 to 100 or whatever it is, and a new fire station gets 83 points. Now, I have nothing against backing up power to our traffic lights. I've argued for that for decades. But there's a level of precision there that I just don't think is warranted. I think there are larger issues of priorities and values that seem to be lost in that. I mean, we're so focused on the numbers and the weighting system that I think there's a risk we lose sight of the forest for the trees. And I think it's good that we do have some sort of data-based system and basis for this, but I really question, how we can get it down to a point or 2 points. That just doesn't make any sense to me from a measurement standpoint. And the final comment I'd like to make is that I think we really do need to look at a broader focus than just stuff in terms of improvements. This is a capital improvements program. It's machines, it's projects, it's streets, it's pipes, and things like that. And I think we also need to look systematically for a human capital improvements plan, not a physical capital improvements plan. And again, hopefully this will be something we can talk about at our retreat planning meeting. But I would like to see us as a council and as a staff and an administration make a systematic attempt to identify those areas in which we need to grow our staff, in which we need to enhance their functioning, in which we need to make sure they have the tools, whether it be software, whether it be training, whether it be professional development opportunities, whether it be career ladders, to advance themselves. People are our most important resource. And we spend a lot of time on the stuff part of it, and I think that's good, that's important. Citizens and taxpayers need to get their money's worth, and we need to be looking at long-term investments. But what I don't see, and what I would argue for very strongly, is a counterpart when it comes to human resources, particularly tapping the 428 people that we have working for the city. The expenses at the end may not be very significant. In the library, for example, we have a $50,000 request. I can sure look at ways of training people for $50,000 or things like that. So it's not a matter of the funds so much. And I don't know that a human resources improvement plan would be all that expensive necessarily. But I think that's a part of the organization, it's a part of city government that we've not looked at adequately enough, in my opinion. It's kind of catch as catch can. It seems like we can find the 50 grand for a new pickup truck. We just found over $500,000 for a new fire truck, which we desperately need. But I think we also need to systematically look at human resource needs. So I'm going to be suggesting we talk about this in more detail at our planning session, because it has to do with these kinds of relationships and priorities that really I think we need to look at more carefully. Again, I'm going to support this capital improvements plan, but I want us to look a little bit more broadly at this whole issue of investing in infrastructure and not just see it limited to stuff. Thank you.
I am also going to be supportive of the CIP plan with the motion. I may have a difference of opinion here from Alderman Patagula on the detail of it. It's probably the most time I've spent on the CIP plan since I've been involved with this. really digging in because, I mean, it is 154 pages long, but if you really do dig into the evaluation questions, the projects themselves, and start to see a collective picture that is drawn up as the why, there are some massive, massive projects that have to take place here in Minot, and it's more than just flood control, it's more than just NAWS. But when we take a look at the projects that we've been talking about from the standpoint of what we're taking care of and what has been deteriorating, and that starts to paint the picture within our CIP and why we're spending dollars, why we're spending the dollars, where we're spending them, not just on roads, but equipment and otherwise. I do enjoy the scoring portion that is related to the actual evaluation questions that lead to that, because it, to me, is the roadmap. And I'm sure this is different to everybody. Normally, I'm not a numbers person, but this does give me an explanation as why we're putting emphasis on one project or another. In terms of the Ann Street Bridge itself, I do enjoy the bridge. I'm, again, going to be supportive of the motion for a couple of different reasons. As $1.927 million, lumber itself has tripled since this number came out. I'm sure that number is going to be substantially different if we were to put that out to bid today. Also, on the side, agreeing with Alderman Ross, I would like to see some grants gone after. If we're going to save the historic bridge, or if a portion of it's going to be saved and relocated if it is torn down somewhere else as part of, I think, a greater picture of historic downtown. I don't know what that looks like. I agree that $1.927 million and likely more is much more important to some of our other improvement projects that are needed within the community, and levying that for property taxes right now, I just don't think would be our best movement forward. So those are my comments. Any further comments before we move? Alderwoman Evans.
Alderman Ross's decision not to separate the motions, I will not be able to, although I support every capital improvement project in this, without it being clean cut from the Ann Street Bridge, I am not going to support this item.
Further discussion?
Mayor?
Yes, Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question for Lance. Lance, what type of work is being considered in the capital improvement plan for the Ann Street Bridge and the upcoming budget?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Pittner, nothing in 2021. In 2022, there's approximately $150,000 or $130,000 that would be needed to start the design work for the bridge and the permitting needed. And then the majority of the cost would come in 2023 for the actual construction. So it'd be the engineering needed in the 22 budget to get the project moving.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Further discussion? Final call. Motion is to approve removing Ann Street Bridge. Please call the roll.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Nope.
Dancer?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to 7.6, the recruitment services for the airport director position. With the recent resignation and impending departure of Rick Felder, the city has the challenge to find a qualified replacement to fill the position of the airport director. The city was fortunate during the last recruitment process for this position to have the assistance of the Airport Consulting and Thorvik, who had been hired to facilitate the opening of the new Minot International Airport Terminal. Her expertise in the aviation area helped to expedite the process. In locating an excellent candidate for the position, the city manager and human resource director recognize that the need to fill this position in a timely manner and are asking that the city council consider authorizing the use of an outside firm to assist in that process. The recommendation to council is to approve using the recruitment services of ADK Consulting and Executive Search for the airport director position, and further authorize the mayor to sign the contract on the city's behalf. And 2, pass the ordinance amending the 2021 annual budget to increase the airport's consultants' expenses for the hiring of the consulting firm to assist with the recruiting of the new airport director using airport cash reserves. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve, second by Alderman Pittner. Alderman Patagula, comment.
I just wanted to ask a question of the city manager. For some reason, I must have spaced out on this particular item when I read my agenda. And he and I have talked about using a recruitment firm, and I very much support that. And I just wanted to ask for a little bit more clarification as to the ADK versus the GOVHR versus Ms. Thorvik.
Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula. Yes, so as we looked at moving forward with this, with Director Feltner tendering his resignation, I did task him with coming up with some recommendations of consulting firms that specialize in recruiting within this industry specifically. And so the ADK Consulting came directly as a recommendation from him as a consulting firm that is very highly recognized as being experts within this career field. With that being said, I did ask our HR director to look for other alternatives of other recruiting firms that may not specialize in airport specifically, but could potentially do a process. Again, giving the technicalities and the expertise needed with this. Again, ADK does have the reputation of knowing everyone in the industry, who are the rising stars, who are the strong candidates, et cetera, and can potentially help recruit candidates to apply for the position that may not otherwise. And I think for this reason is why we're moving forward with this recommendation at this time.
Thank you. That makes us feel much more comfortable. I just wasn't sure if this was, one of these was the one Rick recommended or not. And is Ms. Thorvik associated with any of these firms or not?
I will defer to
our Human Resource Director, Lisa Jonta.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, Ms. Thorvik was actually on site at the time when we were initiating the new terminal. She is not part of this firm. She is part of a consulting firm that assisted in that process. So.
Got it. Thank you.
Any further questions for our Human Resource Director while she's up? Thank you, Lisa. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Final call. Seeing none, the motion is to pass the ordinance with recommendations. Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Dancer?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That is the end of that section of our agenda. Next item is personal appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda. We just ask that you state your city of residency and name. This is an opportunity to come forward and talk about anything that might be on your mind. Name and city of residency, please.
I'm Mike Stamness, and I live in Minot. And I just have a couple comments and questions that I'd like addressed as well. The statements earlier with the gaming on reputable and nefarious didn't set real well with me. I thought that was pretty harsh terminology. One of the things that I find unnerving living on North Hill is how my tax dollars go to improve the city's appearance, and yet we allow four-wheelers to go 50 miles an hour through the ditches in a speed limit area that's only 25, and yet they're allowed to do that. The money that's wasted on seeding on the bypass, up and down our ditches there on North Hill, the issues that have never been addressed on 21st Avenue there in front of that ING facility, the deterioration of the ditches there, they were never completed when that project was done. And to this day, they're still not completed. The acreage right behind my home, Mr. Sitman, as you well know, those trees were cut down with the ideas of building commercial property on that 8 acres or whatever it is there. And those trees have sat there for years. The city of Minot, that's all part of the city now. It used to be county, but it's city now when they went to purchase that property and the ideas of building there. And those trees have sat there for several years now, and they've never been hauled out. I just think it would be nice. And there's another residency between 4th and 5th Avenue on 21st Avenue there that has mountains of garbage in the alley there, and I don't know what the business is there, but that's a residential area, and it sure isn't commercial, and it shouldn't be a 24/7 swap shop area there either. But those are just some of the things that I would like to see addressed and taken care of within the city of Minot too. To spend all that money on beautifying the city and then allowing four-wheelers to tear it up just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. That property was never addressed with the poles that have been placed in there, the new telephone poles. There's mounds of dirt that have been there for years. They've never been leveled or taken care of. That property's only attended once a year, and some farmer comes in and hays it. Otherwise, those of us that live there, we walk through there at least once a week and pick up trash along the fence through that property, to the point that my property is being encroached on from the noxious weeds that grow into my yard because nobody takes care of that property. I would like something finally done with that, and I really appreciate your time, Sean, and allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stamnus. Got a list here, and perhaps city manager can talk with some of the staff to address. I know some of it has been brought up in the past, whether it be the four-wheelers or the trees. I do know that the Minot Public School does now have possession of the ING property. I'm not sure what their focus is going to be on that development, but we'll have city staff look into some of those concerns. Anyone else? This is an opportunity for public appearances to speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda. If not, we move into our next area of our agenda, and this is miscellaneous and discussion items. 9.1 is the Broadway Corridor Study. Item 4443, the second virtual public input informational. A brief presentation of the second virtual public input opportunity will be given during the May 3rd meeting, that is tonight. Additionally, public input opportunity number 2 will also consist of the following activities: the virtual open house, April 19th through the 17th, 2 live question and answer sessions, 5th through the 6th, and 6 listening sessions. So if you would go ahead with the presentation, appreciate it.
Mayor Sidma, Alderman, Alderwomen, thank you for your time. Before I dive into movingbroadway.com, I just want to take a step back and remind you and the public how we got to this point. Last fall, the study team, we completed what's called the conditions assessment. This is the what and why of Broadway. What is it? Why does it act the way it does? In that process, we conducted an existing conditions report, a future conditions report, and this is also when we had the first public input opportunity. We had great input for that. This public input meeting too, it kind of follows that same path. So that kind of brings us to where we're at today. Public input meeting number 2, it's open now through May 17th. There is a virtual component. We've also got a live question and answer period coming up on the 5th and 6th. I encourage you, if you're interested, please register to attend to that. You do have to register early. You cannot just show up with that. That's part of it is tracking of who comes in so it doesn't get overtaken. And then we've also had 6 listening and sessions that Mayor Sibby, you mentioned earlier that you were involved with. So thank you for that. So going to the website, movingbroadway.com, brings you here. We'll highlight a few things on here. Again, talks about Broadway, what it is and what it means to the city. It is the backbone. Scrolling down a little bit, there's more information about the live question answer. Broadway south of 20th Avenue, this is the reconstruction area. That's going to be on May 5th, and then May 6th is for the northern part, north of 20th Avenue. This is downtown, North Broadway. Before I go into the survey, I'll just touch on the other documents on here. This is kind of summary of what's happened so far. If you're interested in diving into one of these, it's a pretty good read, if you ask me. You can dive into the reports, future conditions, alternative analysis. This is kind of what today's presentation and this public input meeting is about, the alternatives. How do we improve Broadway? And then there's also some videos down here that kind of highlight what's going on, as well as these videos are also included in this survey. And then at the very bottom, if you don't want to participate in the survey, but you still have comments you'd like to know, Bethany's contact information is listed down on the bottom down here. Diving back up to the survey quick. Similar to the first public input meeting, we have information right here that kind of shows what the public input meeting is about. So we'll get started. You can click on these question marks. We'll dive into the reconstruction area quick. A little box comes up. This is the video that's on the other page as well. You can click on it. It will expand. Let's go down a little more. You can click on. This kind of dives into each of the alternatives that we could have for South Broadway. The median backage road options, signalized parkway, roundabout parkway. This kind of lists things so you can separate them out and compare the three alternatives with that. Scrolling down a little further, you can pop open the graphics and see what they look like. All this information is available on the previous page in the alternatives report as well. And then at the bottom down here, there is some questions and then also a space for comments if you have specific comments as well. So you can repeat that same process for every section of the corridor, or if you have certain comments or thoughts on specific areas, you can do that. There's also an area in here for bicycle routes. Again, one of the options for bicycle routes, pedestrian routes for this study is actually taking them off Broadway. So how do we accommodate that? And then there is one other thing I want to mention here. There is a demographic survey included with this. This is pushed by the DOT and part of the Civil Rights Act. So if you do participate in the survey, I encourage you to also fill out this information as well. With that, Mayor, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Any questions for our traffic engineer? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And would certainly encourage anyone and everyone to, log in, go and take the survey. The listening portion of that was some very informative in regards to what's being considered. And certainly as we look forward to the further development of North Broadway, South Broadway, the Central Avenue area, this really is the main component of what changes will be coming down the line, both in the near and far term. So something worth check out for the public. Any questions, comments? If not, we'll move on to 9.2. This is the hydrant testing inspection plan. Fire Chief Crunchnoble has a presentation for us on the testing and inspections plan that is moving forward. And I believe Public Works Director Dan Jonason is also joining us.
Mayor, member of council, Dan Jonason is actually going to start us out first.
Good evening, Dan.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Like Chief said, I'll start it out. Basically, the fire department and the public works department has put together a plan to go forward to address some of the long-term, policy so we have in place to address, conditions of our hydrants, inspections, flushing, things like that. So the goals of the program, as you see here, create an inspection flushing program of all the public hydrants in Minot. We have about 2,300 hydrants. Create an accurate inventory and maintenance program using our new asset management software that the engineering department's been implementing to document all this. With this, we're going to also identify a long-term replacement program for a cast iron pipe or CIP piping that's in the older portions of town. Create a flushing program of all the private hydrants. We have somewhere between 200 and 300 or maybe a few more private hydrants. These are typically in mobile home parks, some of the apartment complexes, things like that in town that we don't have direct control over. So the fire department's been working to come up with a program to address all those. And finally, to achieve the highest ISO rating possible for the residents of Minot. So for the inspection flushing program of the hydrants, our water distribution departments created a hydrant inspection procedures manual and a checklist to make sure that each hydrant, we're looking at it or keeping it consistent, and we have, performing inspections following the best management practices. The goal is to complete at least 50% of the public hydrants each year. We've actually already started on this. We've done over 200 of them. With the nice weather we had back in March, it gave us a little bit of a head start on it this year. We've hired 2 part-time personnel. They will be working with one of our full-time, more experienced people to operate the hydrants, so they know the proper operation and inspection and maintenance procedures. With a hydrant, if you close a hydrant too fast, it creates water hammer, and it'll literally blow the lines apart. So there's more to checking a hydrant than just cranking it open and slamming it shut. Mondays and Fridays, we're going to be working on inventorying and also implementing a painting program with this. Tuesdays through Thursdays are the days that we're going to concentrate on the flushing, inspection, and repairs of any hydrants if they're needed. Again, if we have inclement weather, we cannot flush due to water restrictions, which looks like we may have this summer. If things are real dry, we don't want to be wasting 400,000 gallons a day flushing hydrants if we're just trying to keep up at our water plant. So those days we'll be working on just general inspection of the hydrants and also painting them to get them all caught up. So utilizing our new asset management program, which should be coming online, I believe, July?
It'll be in the fall for waters.
Okay. So until then, we'll do it the old-fashioned way.
Mystic.
Pen and paper, but we'll have all the data collected so we can enter it into the asset management program. So one of the other things and issues we run into when we're trying to implement a program like this is a lot of the old cast iron pipes down in the valley. If you look at the picture on the right, that's actually one of our pipes that we replaced. Over years and years of buildup, this is what happens. A 6-inch pipe, there's probably 1.5 inches of capacity left in that pipe. So we will be working over the next year to come up with probably a stronger replacement program for our water main. We currently have about 86 miles of cast iron pipe in the city. So it's costly. Initial estimates is around $250 million of pipe that needs to be replaced. So it's something that we're going to look at programming into our future CIPs. Currently, we have about $1.75 million that we use for water main replacement. That's not only the CIP pipe, but for example, this year, Burdick, we knew there was some work coming up on that needed to be done. So we had to go in and get some of the water main replaced ahead of that. That took about $630,000 of our existing $1.75 million. So every year when these little projects pop up, it eats away at it. So we're going to be trying to put together a long-term program to address this and allocate dollars towards all of that. With that, I will turn it over to the fire chief, and she can update you on the private hydrant stuff.
Hello, Mayor, Member of Council. We have a bunch of private hydrants within the city. They're allowed in private developments, trailer parks, apartment complexes, and they're one of the areas that are more difficult for us, especially when it comes to ensuring that we have good hydrants. And we haven't been doing a good job of following up. They are private, so we don't really monitor them a whole lot. And sometimes we go out, which happened a few times this year, we go out and we don't have working hydrants in those areas. So we're working together with Public Works to identify these private hydrants so we can ensure that they are being maintained. They do fall under our fire code, which is listed there, and under NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. So the hydrants are required to be checked annually and after each operation. So if we come out and we operate those hydrants, they need to be checked after that. They also are required to be flow tested and maintained annually. And on top of that, getting those records of the inspection and testing and maintenance is another thing that we're working on, and we're coming up with a solution for that. So I do want to thank the Water Department for all their help on that. They created that great document for our hydrant flowing, and we'll be working together on getting those private hydrants all into that system too. The other piece is our ISO requirements. ISO, I don't know how familiar you are with ISO, but it's a rating for our community and to assess the risk for fire. So they come in and they look at dispatch, they look at our water supply, and they look at our fire department. So they came in, and we are currently a Class 2 department. So under the water, they look at the hydrants. So they give us credit for the type of hydrants that we have. They also give us credit for the inspection and flow testing of the hydrants. And they also check on our fire flow testing. We currently have a water model, which is preferred by ISO, because they can come in and they can ensure that these have been looked at. There's scientific basis for those, that model, and Dan can talk more about that as far as how they do that. But that is definitely something that they like to see. In 2013, the water department had 30.36 of 40 available points, and in 2017 they had 40 of 40 points, so they did a great job. There was a lot of improvements made in that 4 years' time, and we want to ensure that we continue to have that good rating for water. I don't have anything else. Do you have any questions for us?
Any questions for our fire chief or public works director at this time on the testing? Alderwoman Evans.
I just want to commend you and the Public Works Director. I know we met about this in August, and it is so gratifying to see the collaboration between the two departments to come to a solution for this. So kudos to both of you, and I'm really, really delighted that this program is moving forward. So
Thank you.
great stuff.
Yes, thank you.
Alderman Ross.
Kelly, who's on the private hydrants? Who does the testing?
There's contractors that'll go out and do that, and we will actually be sending them out with the forms that they have to fill out. We'll be sending a list of contractors that do that.
And is there a penalty or citation if they don't produce an annual?
We could cite them under the fire code, and then I'd have to defer to our city attorney, Hendershot, to assist me on all that stuff.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Mr. Jonason and Chief Crouch Noble, I appreciate it. Just as a reminder, if we're testing, the yellow water means your area's been tested. Run your cold water, get it through your system. There's your public service announcement for the summer.
Thank you.
Any other items that need to be discussed under the miscellaneous and discussion items? Alderman Patagula.
Yes, actually, this fits in with the discussion of fire protection, fire safety. I wanted to thank members of the fire department, particularly Battalion Chief Mason Maxwell and firefighter Jeremy Croxall, for spending about 3¼ hours with me last Sunday, giving me a very detailed guided tour of some of our fire trucks. At our previous council meeting, we allocated over $500,000 toward a new fire truck. And I wanted to get an in-depth look at what we're looking for. And I was very, very impressed with the kind of analysis they gave me, was in terms of, I think we had like 106 pages of specifications. I wanted to know why we were asking for those things and what their meaning was. And they nicely showed me an old fire truck, which we kind of borrowed from in terms of having the spec sheet developed, and also some of their ideas for the next fire truck, which we'll hopefully be allocating funds for this year for the new fire station. And besides thanking them and recognizing, I think a really excellent first-rate briefing on this thing, I think it's important that citizens know that there's a lot of staff time and effort that goes into planning these kinds of expenses. Again, in a year and a half or 2 years, we're talking about, $2 million probably. And I was very impressed with the process that the fire department goes through. They have a committee of 6 people consisting of line staff, consisting of captains, and consisting of battalion chiefs, developing very detailed specifications, looking what's available in the field. A fire truck, I've learned, is not something you go to the dealer's lot and buy and kick the tires. Essentially, they're built to spec. They're custom built, at least for our needs. And I want people to know that these expenditures are very well thought through, that the planning process is extensive and comprehensive and garners a lot of input from the people who use this equipment. It isn't a top-down decision. So I want people to know that they're getting their money's worth. And again, I wanted to thank the department for the very professional way in which they're making these major purchases, and particularly for the information these 2 firefighters gave me. So thank them very much.
Any other items under miscellaneous in discussion? I would just lastly make the note that I will be out of town on the 10th through the 13th for work. So President Olson, you'll have the ball if something does come up. If not, we are up for our last item, and that is adjournment.
So moved.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Ross. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.